Welcome to Tales That Terrify, the podcast that turns your deepest fears into chilling reality. Every week, we bring you fresh, unsettling stories designed to haunt your imagination. From whispers in the dark to the horrors just beyond your sight, these tales will leave you questioning what lurks in the shadows. Want more nightmares? Dare to explore our YouTube channel for even more spine-tingling stories. Now, dim the lights, get comfortable, and prepare for this week's descent into terror. The first time I saw the motorcycle, I thought it was a trick of the fog. I'd been hauling a load of steel coils from Baltimore to Cumberland, Maryland, a route I'd driven a dozen times. But that night, everything felt off. Rain had been coming down in sheets since dusk, turning the asphalt into a black mirror, and the dispatcher's warning buzzed in my ear. Watch for mudslides on I-68. Take Route 40 if it gets dicey. It got dicey. By 11 p.m., the highway was closed, flashing signs rerouting semis onto the old two-lane stretch of Route 40. No streetlights, no guardrails, just a winding ribbon of road carved between skeletal trees and rock face. My rig groaned as I crawled uphill, wipers fighting the downpour. That's when I spotted the bike in my side mirror. A black Harley, rider hunched low over the handlebars. No headlight, just the faint red glow of a taillight, like a cigarette burning in the dark. "Where'd you come from?" I muttered. I hadn't passed anyone in miles. The Harley clung to my trailer, close enough to kiss it, weaving slightly as if the rider was drunk. Or worse. I tapped my brakes, a warning. The bike didn't back off. Rain hammered the cab as the road narrowed, cliffs crowding both sides. My knuckles ached from gripping the wheel. The Harley revved, engine snarling over the storm, and lurched into the oncoming lane. For a heartbeat, it rode parallel to my cab. I glanced over and froze. The rider wore a black leather jacket, hooded, face hidden behind a tinted visor. No helmet, just that hood, soaked and dripping. And though I couldn't see eyes, I felt them, a cold, crawling pressure like spiders down my spine. Then the bike vanished, not into the fog, not around a bend. Vanished, like someone flipped a switch. My stomach dropped. The road ahead was empty. "You're tired, Cooper," I told myself, thumping the steering wheel. "Just tired." But the cab smelled suddenly of wet earth and gasoline, sharp enough to sting. 20 minutes later, the Harley reappeared. This time, it was ahead of me, parked sideways in the road. I slammed the brakes, the rig's trailer skidding dangerously close to the cliff's edge. The bike idled, exhaust curling into the rain, rider motionless. "Move, damn you!" I shouted, laying on the horn. The rider raised a gloved hand, slow, deliberate, and pointed up the mountain. Then the Harley tore off, tires spitting gravel, disappearing around a hairpin curve. I didn't want to follow, but there was no room to turn around, no cell signal to call for help. Just the storm and the dark and that bike, taunting me from the shadows. The Harley led me higher, its taillight flickering like a dying ember. Twice it braked suddenly, forcing me to skid to a halt. Twice it vanished when I blinked. By midnight I was shaking, sweat mingling with the rain on my face. That's when the road leveled out and I saw the sign. "Welcome to Frostburg, elevation 2 through 36. Frostburg? That was 20 miles past Cumberland. How had I? The GPS spat static. The Harley revved again, parked now in front of a boarded-up diner, its windows smashed, roof caved in. A rusted sign creaked in the wind. Maggie's Pit Stop, Est 1965. The rider pointed to an overgrown path beside the building, then gunned the engine and sped into the trees. I should have stayed put, but something about that pointing glove, the urgency of it, pulled me out of the cab. The rain had eased to a drizzle, the air thick with pine and rot. I grabbed my flashlight, boots sinking into mud as I trudged toward the path. The woods were too quiet. No owls, no crickets, just the squelch of my footsteps. The beam of my light caught something metallic in the underbrush, a motorcycle helmet, cracked and mossy. Beyond it, a ravine. I almost didn't see the car. It was a rusted sedan, half buried in ferns at the bottom of the slope, roof crushed, windshield starred. My flashlight trembled as I picked my way down. The driver's door hung open, skeletal trees growing through the frame. Inside, the seats were moldy, the dashboard sprouting mushrooms, and on the passenger seat, a faded photo. A man in a leather jacket, arm around a smiling woman. Behind them, Maggie's Pit Stop, vibrant and alive. The radio on my hip crackled to life. Missing since October 1983, last seen at Maggie's suspected drunk driver. A man's voice cut through the static, raw with rage. Find me. The Harley's engine roared behind me. I spun, flashlight beam slicing the dark. The bike stood at the edge of the ravine, rider still as a statue. Slowly, he removed his hood. His face wasn't a face. It was a skull, flesh peeled back by time, jaw hanging open in a silent scream. The visor lifted, revealing hollow eye sockets filled with swirling black mist. He pointed at the wrecked car, then at himself, and the radio never looked. I stumbled back, falling into the mud. The Harley revved, front wheel lifting, and the rider charged, not at me, but at the ravine. He plunged over the edge, bike and all, vanishing into the car's wreckage. The radio went dead. Dawn found me at the Frostburg police station, soaked and speckled with mud. They didn't believe me at first, not until I showed them the coordinates, the photo, the helmet. Turns out, the car belonged to a couple who'd vanished after a night at Maggie's in '83. The man, a mechanic named Joe, had been the prime suspect until the bartendress finally confessed on her deathbed. She'd seen a trucker force Joe's car off the road after a fight, then lie to cover it up. They found Joe's bones in the ravine, still clutching his wife's locket. I don't know why he chose me that night. Maybe it was the rig, something big enough to push him into the light. Maybe he'd been trying to hitch a ride home for 40 years. Either way, I still drive Route 40 sometimes, though never after dark. Folks in Frostburg say Joe's Harley roars through town on stormy nights, but he doesn't chase anyone anymore. Last week, I passed Maggie's pit stop. They've bulldozed it, put up a memorial plaque where the diner stood. I pulled over, left a dented motorcycle bell I'd bought at a truck stop, an old tradition meant to ward off evil spirits. As I drove away, my rearview mirror caught a flicker of movement. A man in a leather jacket, smiling beside a woman in a summer dress. They waved once, then dissolved into the sunlit dust. Joe finally found his way home. And me? I keep my CB radio on these days, listening for truckers who've seen things they can't explain. I tell them to follow the ghosts. Not all of them mean you harm. Some just want to be seen. The GPS blinked thrice as I merged onto I-80, the sodium glow of Salt Lake City fading in my mirrors. Big Bertha, my 2022 Freightliner, purred like a cat hooked up to a caffeine drip. 400 horses under the hood, adaptive cruise control, and a dash cam that uploaded to the cloud every 10 minutes. Modern trucking's supposed to be safe. Boring, even. Then the Mustang showed up. First, it was just headlights, LEDs, blinding white, tailgating me through the Utah flats. I thumbed the thank you blinker, 3 quick brake taps, but the car didn't pass. When I downshifted to 65, it matched me. A 2024 GT, dark gray, tinted windows. No front plate. Nevada temp tag taped crooked on the rear, numbers smudged with road grime. Asshole, I muttered, cracking a Red Bull. Road warriors in muscle cars think they own the blacktop. But then the driver's window slid down. Pop, pop, pop. My brain registered the sound a half-second late. Firecrackers before the passenger window exploded. Safety glass snowed over the dash. Jesus! I swerved, trailer swaying as Bertha's collision alarm shrieked. The Mustang accelerated, pulling ahead, and I caught a glimpse of the shooter. Black hoodie, face covered by a neck gaiter, eyes hidden behind reflective aviators. At night. Weird. My hands shook. Who the hell shoots at a semi? I grabbed the CB mic. Breaker 19, any cowboy out there got eyes on a gray Mustang GT? Just took shots at me westbound on 80 near Wendover. Static. Then a voice, shredded by interference. Copy. That's the 3rd this week. Cops say road rage, but... The signal died. The Mustang reappeared in my mirror, closing fast. No way it looped back that quick unless it had a hidden ramp. I punched the gas, Bertha groaning up to 85. The Freightliner's touchscreen lit up with warnings. Engine overload. Trailer stability critical. Pop, pop. 2 more rounds spiderwebbed the windshield. I ducked, cranking the wheel hard right. The trailer fishtailed, throwing me against the seatbelt. The Mustang vanished again. Dispatch, this is Jeff Barlow, I barked into the hands-free. Unit 2417, shots fired on I-80, requesting immediate. The line went dead. Not static, dead. My phone, too. No signal. Even the dash cam's red recording light had blinked out. That's when the cold hit. Not the AC, this was damp, bone deep like fog off a graveyard. The Mustang's engine roared behind me, way louder than a 5.0 liter should. I glanced at the thermal cam on the dash, night vision, standard in new models, and gagged. The driver's heat signature wasn't human. It was inverted. A black cutout against the infrared, colder than the desert night. The glasses, glowing white hot, like they were reflecting a furnace. Bullshit, I hissed. Glitch in the damn software. Pop. A bullet seared past my ear, burying itself in the headrest. I screamed, yanking the air horn. The Mustang swerved, avoiding the blast, then surged alongside. The driver leaned out, arm extended. Not a pistol, a revolver, old-school .38 snub-nose. But the hand holding it was wrong. Sallow skin, tight as a latex glove. Fingertips blackened like they'd been dipped in tar. The neck gaiter had slipped, revealing a lipless slit of a mouth. No, not human. I slammed the brakes. Bertha's ABS shuddered, the trailer jackknifing in a shower of sparks. The Mustang shot ahead, but I didn't wait. I wrenched the wheel left, aiming the rig's grill at its taillights. The Freightliner's bumper clipped the Mustang's rear quarter panel, sending it spinning into the desert. I didn't stop to check, just floored it, watching the thermal cam. The car's heat signature flared, engine fire, then winked out. 10 miles later, my phone chirped back to life. "Barlow, this is dispatch. You there?" "Yeah," I panted. "Guy in a Mustang tried to kill me. Cops need to check mile marker. We've got 2 units at exit 84 for a car fire. Gray Mustang, Nevada tags. Driver's gone." "Gone?" "Tire tracks lead into the desert, but..." The dispatcher hesitated. "No footprints." I pulled into Petro truck stop outside Wells, shaking so bad I could barely unbuckle. The dashcam had rebooted. Footage showed the Mustang, the gunshots, even the crash. But when the thermal playback reached the inverted silhouette, the screen pixelated into static. The Nevada Highway Patrol took my statement. No bodies, no suspects, just skid marks and a burned-out shell registered to a Reno rental company. "Stolen ID," the cop said. "Happens all the time." But as I walked back to Bertha, an old-school trucker in a John Deere cap nodded at my rig. "Saw your star map," he said. "What?" He pointed to Bertha's passenger door. 3 bullet holes formed a perfect triangle. "Orion's belt," he said. "My pappy used to say the interstate's haunted. But the stars, they keep the bad things off your tail." I laughed nervously. "Yeah, sure." But later at dawn, I looked it up. Orion's belt, directly west this time of year. The direction I'd been running. I'm writing this from a Denver depot. Bertha's patched up, the bullet holes filled with Bondo. But tonight, I'm sticking to daylight hauls. And if I see another Mustang, I've got a new dash cam and a .45 in the glove box. The rain was relentless as I cruised down the interstate, headlights cutting through the sheets of water cascading from the night sky. It wasn't my first storm, not by a long shot. I've been driving over the road for years now, and I've seen my fair share of rough weather. But this one felt different. The rain came down in sheets, like the sky itself had opened up to drown the world below. I was starting to feel the pressure of the road weighing down on me. It was late, somewhere past midnight, and the only other vehicles on the highway were those brave enough to push through the storm. The rhythm of the truck, the sound of the engine humming along, and the occasional splash of water hitting my windshield was almost hypnotic. I was making good time, but with the rain and the visibility shot, I figured it was best to stay cautious. I was about halfway through the stretch of highway when I first noticed the headlights in my rearview mirror. At first, I thought it was just another vehicle passing me, but the lights weren't fading as they usually did. They were staying close, almost too close. I squinted into the mirror, trying to make out the shape of the vehicle. That's when I saw it. A black sedan, driving erratically, swerving back and forth, its lights flashing in and out of focus. It was as though the driver was fighting for control. I instinctively eased off the gas, slowing my rig a bit to give the sedan some space. But the car didn't back off. Instead, it sped up, weaving dangerously from one lane to the next, as though it was trying to catch up with me. I was a seasoned driver. You get used to the crazies out on the road, but there was something unsettling about this one. The car was like a shadow, moving in a way that wasn't natural for a vehicle on the highway. My knuckles tightened around the wheel as I glanced at the rear view again. I was starting to get a bad feeling about this. I knew that there were a lot of unpredictable characters out on these roads, but this guy, whoever he was, wasn't just reckless. He was deliberate. The way his headlights seemed to aim directly at my cab, it was like he was trying to intimidate me. Suddenly, the car was right beside me. I could make out the figure inside, a man wearing a dark hoodie, his face obscured by shadows, but there was no mistaking the look in his eyes when he looked over at me. I saw the flash of something metal in his hand. The man raised it. I wasn't sure at first if he was just showing me something, some tool or maybe a weapon to scare me, but then it clicked. He was holding a gun, a big one too. My heart dropped into my stomach. He wasn't just driving aggressively, he was trying to send a message. I could feel my pulse quicken. My mind was racing, but there wasn't time to second-guess myself. I needed to focus. I had to get out of this situation. But how? The highway was empty, and I was stuck on this stretch of road. If I tried to pull over, I could end up boxed in. If I kept driving, it'd be like inviting him to play a game of chicken. I needed to think fast. My eyes flicked to the rear-view mirror again, and I saw him pull ahead slightly, still weaving between the lanes. This guy was determined. That much was clear. He wasn't going to back off. I had two options. Either I could try to outrun him, or I could wait for an opening and make a move. I decided to trust my instincts. I knew the road well enough to understand that there were stretches where it was almost impossible to make a clean pass. The rain was making everything slick, and I could feel the truck's tires sliding just a little as the rainwater gathered. I couldn't afford to mess up, so I held my ground. The next time he came up beside me, I hit the air horn. Loud. A single booming blast that reverberated through the night. For a split second, I thought it wouldn't be enough. The man kept his gun raised. His grip tightened on it, and I swore I saw him smile, like he was savoring the fear he had instilled in me. Then something happened. He hesitated. It was brief, but it was there. The hesitation was all I needed. I punched the accelerator. The rig surged forward, my engine roaring as the truck pulled away from the crazy driver's car. I didn't look back. I just focused on the road ahead, the thrum of the engine and the rumble of the tires beneath me, telling me I was gaining speed. But I wasn't out of danger yet. The man in the black sedan had no intention of letting me get away. I saw his headlights reflecting in my side mirror again, and before I knew it, he was tailgating me. So close, I could see the outline of the car in my peripheral vision. I slammed my fist on the horn again, blasting it in short bursts, trying to throw him off. But the guy didn't flinch. He kept on me like a predator chasing its prey. Then, luck, if you could call it that, came into play. A small curve in the road appeared ahead. It was just a slight bend, but it was enough to create a moment of uncertainty for anyone not paying attention. I could see the man's car start to sway just a little as he tried to navigate the turn while staying right behind me. He wasn't prepared for it. The car's rear tires slid out from under him as he came around the curve, and I heard the screech of tires as he fought for control. In an instant, I made my move. I swerved right, swinging the truck over the line and onto the shoulder. It wasn't a perfect move. I was risking the edge of the road, but I needed to break the man's momentum. I could feel the tires grip the wet pavement as I slowed just enough to make the turn, narrowly avoiding the guardrail. I heard the screech of the sedan's tires as it swerved out of control, too, but by the time he'd regained any semblance of control, I was already 100 yards ahead. I didn't stop there. I kept the pedal to the metal, pushing the truck harder, faster. I had no intention of slowing down until I was sure the man wasn't behind me anymore. Minutes passed, and the rain only got heavier, but the crazy driver had faded into the distance, his headlights disappearing into the wall of water behind me. My breath came in heavy bursts, but I didn't ease off the gas until I was certain I was out of his reach. I made it to the next truck stop about an hour later, my heart still pounding in my chest, but but the adrenaline beginning to wear off. I pulled into the lot and parked under the flickering lights. The storm had calmed somewhat, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I got out of the truck, stretching my legs after what felt like a marathon. I hadn't even realized how tense I'd been. I glanced around the lot, quiet now, with a few trucks parked here and there. I made my way into the diner, grateful for the hot cup of coffee that greeted me. It wasn't until I sat down, my hands still shaking from the encounter, that I allowed myself to think about what had happened. I didn't know who that guy was or why he was acting the way he did, but one thing was clear. I just had a close call. And for once, I wasn't sure if I had survived by sheer luck or by the grace of some higher power looking out for me. But I was alive, and that was enough. In this line of work, you don't get too many chances to walk away. But tonight, I had, and I wasn't about to forget that. The storm had come out of nowhere. The heavy rain pounded against the windshield of the truck as Mark gripped the wheel, eyes darting nervously to the road ahead. He could barely see anything through the thick mist and sheets of water crashing against the glass. Beside him, Sarah wiped the condensation from the window, trying to get a better look at their surroundings. The mountains were swallowed by the clouds, their dark silhouettes disappearing into the storm's fury. "Mark, are we even on the right trail?" she asked, her voice shaky. "I think so. The map says this road leads to the campsite," he said, but his words lacked conviction. The rain was relentless, and the trail had become more treacherous with every passing mile. Their campsite was still miles away, but the truck's engines sputtered and stuttered, giving them a bad omen. "We need to stop. If we keep going, we'll get stuck," Mark said, his voice tight with worry. He pulled over, the truck's tires hissing on the slick gravel. They both stepped out into the storm, the cold wind slapping against their faces as the rain soaked through their clothes. Sarah shivered, looking around in the near darkness. The headlights of the truck illuminated a clearing ahead. There, half hidden by the trees, stood an old ranger station. Is that a ranger station?" Sarah asked, squinting through the rain. Mark nodded, though he felt a chill creeping down his spine. The station looked abandoned, the windows dark and empty, its wood weathered and decaying from years of neglect. But it was a shelter, and they couldn't stay out in the storm. "We'll just wait it out. It'll be fine." They made their way to the station, the heavy rain masking any sounds of their footsteps. As they reached the porch, the door creaked open on its own, as if inviting them inside. Hesitant but desperate, they stepped over the threshold. Inside, the air was musty, filled with the scent of mildew and old wood. The dim light from their flashlights revealed dusty old furniture scattered about, a wooden desk, a rickety chair, and a fireplace in the corner. An old map of the surrounding forest was tacked to the wall, its edges curling from age. "This place feels wrong," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "I know, but it's just an old station. Nothing more," Mark said, trying to convince himself. Sarah was already nervously pacing near the window, glancing out at the storm. "It feels like it's been abandoned for decades." "Well, it's probably been empty for a while," Mark replied, his unease creeping in as he scanned the room. The entire place had an eerie stillness to it, like it had been untouched for far too long. There was no sign of the usual camping gear or emergency supplies that a ranger station might offer. Just old, forgotten furniture. Mark sat down on a nearby chair, trying to shake the feeling of dread that had settled over him. "We'll just rest here until the storm passes. It'll be okay." But Sarah wasn't convinced. She kept turning her head toward the corners of the room, her unease growing by the minute. The wind howled outside, rattling the wooden walls, and every now and then the storm's thunderous roars would mask a strange sound, like scraping, scratching. "Did you hear that?" she asked, her voice shaking. Mark looked up from the floor, distracted. "What do you mean?" She motioned toward the dark corners of the room. "That sound. It's like something's moving, scratching." Mark paused, listening carefully. At first, all he could hear was the wind, the pounding rain, and the creaking of the building as it seemed to sway with the gusts. But then he heard it, faint but unmistakable, scraping like something dragging against wood. "Okay, that's weird," he muttered. "It's coming from the wall," Sarah said, her eyes wide with fear. She pointed to the wall near the fireplace. The sound was louder now, almost frantic, as if something was trying to get out from within. Mark stood slowly, unsure of what he was about to discover. Maybe it's just an animal, a raccoon or something. He took a few hesitant steps toward the wall, his flashlight sweeping across the dusty surface. The closer he got, the more uncomfortable he felt. The air grew colder, the temperature dropping in a way that felt unnatural for a stormy night. The scraping continued, almost rhythmic now, but there was something wrong about it. It wasn't the sound of claws or teeth. It was almost like nails, sharp and deliberate, dragging against the wood. Mark reached the wall and pressed his ear against it, trying to listen closer. Then, he noticed something strange. The wood didn't feel like it belonged. The paneling around the wall was loose, as though it could be moved. His hand instinctively reached for it, and as his fingers brushed the surface, the scraping stopped. For a brief moment, the house fell into silence. Mark stood frozen, holding his breath, waiting for something to happen. And then, the wall groaned. Not from the wind, but from the pressure inside, as though something was shifting beneath it. Suddenly, the wall creaked and split open, revealing a narrow, hidden door behind the paneling. A faint, musty light leaked through the crack, casting an eerie glow on the room. "What the hell?" Mark gasped, his pulse racing. "What is this?" Sarah's eyes were wide with terror. "I don't think we should open it." But before Mark could even reply, a gust of wind slammed into the building, rattling the windows and making the door shift violently. The door flung open on its own with a violent, screeching sound. And from within, they both heard it, a low, guttural growl. Something was in there. "Mark, we need to leave, right now," Sarah said, her voice trembling. But it was too late. The growl turned into a series of desperate, raspy breaths, followed by another sound, something dragging. Slowly, a figure began to emerge from the shadows within the hidden room. At first it was just a silhouette, its form distorted and unnatural, long limbs stretched out in all directions. Its face was a blur of twisted features, the eyes too large, glowing faintly in the dark. Mark froze, paralyzed with fear, unable to look away from the figure. It crawled toward them with disturbing speed, its movements jerky and unnatural, like a marionette being controlled by invisible strings. Its mouth was open wide, revealing rows of sharp, jagged teeth that dripped with something dark and viscous. "Mark!" Sarah screamed, her voice barely audible over the rushing storm outside. Mark stumbled backward, grabbing for the door, but it slammed shut in front of him, trapping him inside. The room felt smaller now, the walls closing in. The air grew thick and suffocating, almost as if the creature was feeding on their fear, growing stronger with each passing moment. The thing crawled closer, its head tilted to the side as if studying them. Its eyes, or what remained of them, gleamed with an eerie red light, sending waves of terror through Mark's body. And then, in one swift motion, it lunged. Sarah screamed again, but Mark was already dragging her toward the other exit, the one near the back of the station. The creature's claws scraped against the floor as it gave chase, its eerie growl growing louder. The storm outside seemed to intensify, as though nature itself was reacting to the terror unfolding inside the station. They reached the back door, but it was locked. The storm outside had whipped up so fiercely that it was impossible to tell whether the door could even be opened. Mark turned to face the creature. It was only a few feet away now, the faint light from the open hidden room casting its grotesque shadow across the walls. He had no idea how much time they had left. His mind raced, but nothing came to him. The creature's eyes locked with his, and for a split second, Mark could hear a whisper in his mind. "Stay. Forever." The door behind them burst open, and the last thing Mark saw was the creature's outstretched limbs. The ranger station was silent again, the storm howling in the distance. But the scratching, it never stopped. It never stopped because it had found new victims, and it always needed more. And that concludes this week's chilling journey into the unknown. We hope these tales have left you looking over your shoulder and questioning the darkness around you. Craving more horror? Subscribe to our YouTube channel for even more terrifying tales. Until next time, remember, there are always more nightmares waiting to be told.